So, you might know me online. This is my online persona, Pablisco. And I started about 14 years ago. Oh, it's been that long, like with Android. And I know one of my passions, which I know a lot of people, I think, have, is Gradle. Then I remember when Kotlin started, and it was so exciting, and now it just feels such a distant memory. What is it, like 6, 7 years? Such a long time. And then not long ago, started with Kotlin. I was at the time working with Kava, and we were part of a beta testing. That was interesting. Everything broke like every week, which now we get the feeling with KMP as well. Yeah, now we have Kotlin multi-platform and composed KMP. So this is kind of like things I like. A bit more about me. I'm from Aragon. I think that map might be a little bit out of date, but yeah, somewhere near the Pyrenees. I miss the mountains. I also live in Cornwall. It's a long, long drive. Hopefully you enjoy it. It was worth it coming down here. And one last interesting aspect about me, my mom actually wanted to call me Sutai. I've actually got the domain with the .ai, so I might do something next year with it. It might, definitely artificial, not sure how intelligent it will be, but we'll see. Also, a bit of a disclaimer, I don't mean that I don't know what I'm doing entirely, but I want to say that please take all what I'm saying today as advisory and as a starting point for you to try to learn how KMP works. Everything is a little bit in the air. It's very, very much in flux, so it's quite a new topic. So yeah, I think, oh yeah, who here does Android? Go on, raise your hand. Quite a lot of people, nice. No, leave it up. Who here has Kotlin in the code base? Leave it up, good. What about, how many in here have 100% Kotlin? Ooh, more than I expected, that's good. And how many of you guys are using KMP? Oh, yeah, I was expecting 3 or 4. So fuller stack, that's a term I like to use when you include Android and iOS into the full stack paradigm in a way. It's not related to the pub chain in London. And talking about KMP, one of the memes or comics that always reminds me is this one. Hopefully you know about XKCD, about how you have 14 standards now. Oh, let's unify everything into one, and then now we have 15 standards. So that's how we get more standards. And when talking about KMP, you have to think also about different alternatives. And there is some frankly valid alternatives, right? We have Flutter, we have React Native, I think it's Cordova, no, I remember that one, and the .NET one, which I learned recently they changed the name. It's all about rebranding. And they're all valid options. Like, I don't think there's one better than the other. There's different type of situations where you might have one or another. And also it depends on what poison you choose, right? So if you start learning Java at uni, most likely you're going to do still Java, maybe, hopefully Kotlin. Again, if you start using JavaScript, hopefully you move on to TypeScript, fingers crossed, or maybe Dart. I have an interesting relationship with Dart in the past, or C#. So it all depends on what you've grown from. And again, there's no better or worse. Well, except for that one. Ignore that one. And also, it's quite interesting what's happening at the moment, because there's a lot of new technologies with no code, which hopefully I see some eyebrows raising. It's also a valuable solution, right? Because if you need to test a market, you don't want to spend 200, 500, I don't know, a million into an app, that then it's going to flop. So it's a good way to kind of do something, and then you can actually hire a team, hopefully someone from Novoda, to kind of fix the app, well, not fix, but like build it properly, right? And yeah, you might be thinking, moving boxes around is more development, but it's like, as long as it works, why not? So, why KMP? Because it's a delightful language. Kotlin is so nice. I know I'm biased. I've been doing it for so long now that it's such a nice language. But also there's a really nice community. We have the Kotlin Land community. We have Kotlin Conf every year. Sadly, I won't be able to go this year. Londroid as well. And also I think we have, Kotlin London. And I think the community is really, really nice. I haven't been in other communities, so I haven't got much perspective, but it's a positive, right? And one very important thing is library cohesion and how everything seems to work really nicely. And if you base your libraries on top of these ones, there's always exceptions, but most of the time everything works nice. And being very fan of Compose, that's a really, really good reason to use KMP. In my opinion, still work in progress, but we'll get there. But more importantly, it's cozy. Had to get the cats in. It feels familiar, right? It's something that we work on, so it's good. So, has anybody used other platforms other than KMP? Has anybody used Flutter in the room? Oh, that's a good number. What about, I might get kicked out, React Native? Anybody? That's a good number, yeah. So, I actually, I'm now currently in between contracts, and one of the things that I was is like trying new things, because it's always good to get out of your comfort zone. So I tried to do React Native, and one of the things that I also wanted to try is AI. And AI learning, within, I think, 2 or 3 days, I had a running app. So also highly recommend if you want to expand your knowledge of different libraries, AI like the one provided by JetBrains is actually surprisingly good. Don't ask anything that is not programming, because it's going to say, nah, I can't do that. So yeah. The other one, I've recently been in a project using Flutter, and at first I was like, should I try this? And again, like with the help of AI, I was actually, within a couple of weeks, I was fixing bugs, making features, breaking things. That's when you know that you're doing the right thing. So also, what's my experience so far with KMP? A couple of years ago, I don't know, time is a bit funny, but a couple of years ago I was working with a company, and we had the share logic, which I think most of the people that is trying it has the share logic, and then you share in between iOS and Android, especially if you use MVI or MVVM. It's quite, I mean, there's so many ways that you can write a state machine, right? So what we used to have is basically iOS, Android, shared, and we had the presentation with each platform, all good. Problem, we had 3 different repositories. So every time someone made a change to the logic, we had to deploy to GitHub packages and then consume it from this either side. So at least 2 or 3 times a week, we had a message saying, stop working, everything is broken, because someone on Android changed something and didn't check with iOS. So like, it was quite painful, and for months I was asking, can we do monorepo, please? And that's what we did, and actually merged everything together, and everything was so much nicer to work with. There was more collaboration as well between the teams, and you could actually run all the tests in one place. So this is usually what I think when you have a monorepo. This is my flow chart. If it's used externally, then yeah. Have a separate repo, and if it doesn't update very often, like for example the sign system won't update very often, that might make sense to have it separate. For everything else, I think, and also the big companies who use monorepos, but that's an argument from authority, right? So I would encourage people to try to have monorepos, because then also encourage collaboration between teams, right? You can do pairing, you can have the iOS guys or girls do Android code, and vice versa. You can get the Androids. And I think a few years back, at Novoda, I think doing that kind of thing, kind of have pair programming sessions where the iOS developer would do Android and vice versa, and it's great because you can learn how things work on both sides, right? Oh yeah. Now, one of the questions is how do you migrate? And someone asked me earlier. So, does everybody remember when we switched from Java to Kotlin? It was
Copy paste Kotlin.
yeah, you just run the tool and it changed everything. Nothing wrong with the code that was produced. It was painful, and I remember that we would do either say, oh, let's just use it on test. Great, that's a good way to get used, familiarized. That's really good. And also, the next step was, oh, let's do new code. So it's about doing little things, right? Not going, oh yeah, let's change everything, because that's when you start breaking things, especially if you don't have a good test suite. So here's some of the things that you could do to use KMP, as long as you have a monorepo, of course. So, for example, extracting design resources, and we're talking about like fonts, strings. I'm going to move this 1 second. Like images, colors, things that they don't change often, so it's reasonably easy to change that into a place that can be shared between the two. And again, that could be used as a separate repo. And we already have tools like, I'm not sure if anybody's used this library. It's really, really handy. It broke last time I used it, but it works quite well to kind of share different resources between the different platforms. Now, another good starting point would be models and persistency, right? Models is something that is quite small enough that is not as risky as changing like full logic of the application logic. And also, anybody use SQLite here? Oh, I was hoping there were more people. But SQLite, should I do this pun? Is that the light? It's actually nice and refreshing to write your code in SQL, and that will generate something like this. And you can also do operations like, and that will generate something like that. So then you can have all the different operations. It's great because it gives you everything you need to do the persistency, basically. And one of the things I first struggled with it was how do you integrate with serialization, right? Because at some point it's gonna have to hit the network, and you can't really use something that's not. You have to transform it to JSON or whatever. And actually, I was quite surprised how easy it was. Just have to do that. And that generates everything that you need to transform into a JSON, or I can't remember if it support any other formats at the time. But yeah, I highly recommend giving it a try, and it's a good way to kind of start shifting things to share code, basically, because hopefully most of the models that you're using on both apps are going to be the same, and the ones that are not, you can add them. Now, another topic is, especially if you, it's about project structure, right? Especially when you go into a monorepo, you have to really think about how to structure the code. Yeah, remember, monorepo if you can. Hopefully that's not too much of a hot topic. This is a project I've been working on, and hopefully I'll have it released soon. But the idea is to have all the different distributions, targets, also the server and utils, but then distribute everything into features, and each feature have different modules for the different parts. So like the different parts we could have is in UI, you have your components, compose screens and navigation. Then you have the client, which is the one that will talk to the service. Then the model, as we're talking model and persistency, I know the model is a bit of a funny word, depending the definition you have of it. And then the service then is all collated into the what we had before, into the server. So then when you are in a feature, you have everything you need in there, and there's less likelihood of crossing boundaries, basically. And roughly, it would look something like this, right? So you have all your targets, then you have the shared main, which is so basically it makes all the different targets very thin, and then the shared is the one that actually combines all the UIs. Then the UI will consume data from the client, which then has a shared model in between the client and the service. And as you can see, as I was saying earlier, you have the server that serves. And I'm really bad at segues, so I'll let this cat segue to the, I know it's not the same word, but there you go, all about cats. Now, as where it gets a little bit crazy in terms of ideas. This is a term I've made up. It's about an idea how to improve networking when you're working in a project like this. The basic looks like this. So you have a path, an input, an output. If anybody is familiar with functional programming, every function has an input and an output. Even if you have multiple inputs, it's going to be a combination of those, like a union. Yeah. So this is like the simplest way I found to define operations. And I said operations because normally we do it done through the network, but you could have operations that go into native code or something like that. And then in each feature, you would have something like this, where you define the different tokens as constants that you can consume from both the backend and the front end as we're sharing the code. So for instance, on the client, hopefully I won't scare anybody with a fold word in there. Then you can just get that token, which will give you the data. This is a bit simplistic, and I'm working on a more interesting example. But the key thing is that then, on using Ktor, you can then define the same endpoints. What does this mean? That the backend and the front end are now bound but in a type-safe manner, right? And if we change something on one side, it's going to break everything else. So you're forcing yourself to not break things. And I always say that I'd rather have a compiler test my code than having to write extra code and integration. So it's one way to solve that problem. The other thing, because these are just function calls, you can substitute them quite easily. So in your test, you could have fakes. So instead of going to network, it will fetch something that you fake locally. Or if you want to do a demo for a feature that is not implemented on the backend yet, you can have someone, you short-circuit it instead of going to the network, you just provide some data. Also, if you have multiple environments, it's relatively easy to switch between one or the other. And another benefit of this is composition of queries, because you're sending a query object. It's so much easier to layer things. So in this case, for example, we can do composition of a login implementation of the client, then a persistency, and then a network. So at each level, you can say, okay, the first one is just no side effects. So you're just going to log it. The second one, because the persistency is going to go, okay, if I have something, I can then return it. If not, I'm going to send it to the next level, and I go to networking. It's not ready yet, but I'm working on something, and hopefully I'll release it soon. So follow me up, and it should be fun, because it's got games in it. And yeah, Finn. Why is it not going to the last one? Oh, there you go. Oh yeah, I'm actually looking for clients at the moment. So if you need help with your projects, let me know. Or look at my website. It's very simple and boring. But yeah, any questions? I think all the hard questions were asked on the previous talk, so that's good.
Relative to brief example there, were you using Ktor for the client server there to be server and user?
Yes, I forgot that detail. It's, yeah, mostly cater, which is, yeah, right now when you're doing multi-platform, it's kind of the only solution that works across, like, or the best one, I find, yeah. Thanks.
The client side and the server side use the same API. How do you handle backward compatibility? That you know, not updated applications.
That's a really good question. On web, it's easy because you deploy every time. At the moment, again, I'm working on those kinks on my side project, but I imagine that you'll have to add some kind of versioning to make sure that you're talking to the right endpoint or to the right version of the endpoint. Also, ideally, one thing that when you start making your app, make sure you define force upgrade, because that's the best way to kind of like if you make changes that are breaking, to make sure that the users are in the latest. It's not the nicest for the user because they have to upgrade, but it's one easy solution.
There was a slide where you had, can you, start going back? Yeah, keep going. More. Sorry. More past the cat. That one.
Yeah.
Okay, so you've got Android, iOS, web desktop, and then shared, and then you have UI inside your features box.
Mm-hmm.
What goes inside the UI? Do you have things like activities and view models inside that UI box?
That's a really good point. I've always been a big fan of single activity applications. The life cycle is a bit of a pain on Android, and I think it's one of the sources of so many complications that we have to endure. So normally I would have just one activity. And in some cases you might have a secondary, like especially if you do like sharing, but then I'll probably treat that as a separate app altogether in a way. Yeah.
Does the activity live inside that UI?
No, we live on the Android, so on the target. So that's why, the shared has what I call the main, so it's like single entry point, and basically the targets are very thin. They just defer to the shared, using compose obviously. Well, not obviously, but yeah. That's the idea. But hopefully I'll have something to share soon. Yeah. Second? No, UI in this. I only have one view model. So in this case, the UI will be just the composed components basically, and then the client will have more of the logic. And actually, some of the state management will be done in the client, or we'll see how complicated I get it once I get it fully working.
What do you use for navigation?
Oh.
What do you use for navigation?
Google Maps, no. That's a tricky. There isn't a standard. There's a few ones, but I ended up just doing it myself because at the end of the day, it's a stack. It's something, finally all the questions that you get on the interview are useful. But I just have my own stack. It's quite simple at the moment. I'll see how complicated it gets. But basically, because normally, even then, I would recommend doing a simple abstraction, because then if you want to use a library, it's so much easier to switch to one library or another. So it's always worth to have your own internal navigation API, even though you might at some point, whenever we have an official navigation API, then we can actually switch to that. But basically.
Thank you. In this picture, why do you have the server separated from the shared structure? why do we
Sure,
like?
explain a
Have
bit
you
better.
ever tried to like get the place in when we say multi-platform that goes beyond just the front end and then leaks into the back end and vice versa?
So these ones are standalone, and that represents. I probably should have explained a bit better. Sorry. So each one is a different feature. So it will be a sub module of all of them. That's why each feature has a service that provides, for example, authentication would have all the different tools. And also those are exposed by models, so they can be used externally by other features. And then server is the one that kind of puts everything together. And at some point when I learn Docker fully, then I can start deploying the server. But that's the plan, basically. I'm not sure if that answers the question. But, all
Good
right.
enough.
Any questions?
No questions?
Thank you.
Thank you, Sutai.